Get out on the Twisted Tea Hotline, presented by Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea, official sponsor of your Cleveland Browns. Keep it twisted, Cleveland. We are joined by NFL analyst at Westwood One, former general manager of the Raiders, and of course NFL Network, Mike Mayock joins us. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. It's obviously we're 48 hours or so away. When you got in the chair and it was you making the picks versus being an analyst and making the picks, the reason I ask is Nathan and I just did a mock draft on one of the sites and went through all 7 rounds, and you get a little juice. It's something on a computer, obviously, and it's all for fake. You did it for real. What was the biggest difference, or what was a perception you thought would be true and then was different in reality versus your previous job to then when you were the general manager of the Raiders?
I think the reality is the overriding pressure that comes with every pick versus just kind of doing a mock draft and having some fun. And I used to tell my buddies when I was at NFL Network and I knew all the GMs and head coaches and everybody, and I would talk to them before the draft. I would share kind of my not my 7-round mock, but my 7-round stack of what I called league value. And then I would have to do a mock draft on television, and they would all laugh at me. They're like, yeah, you do an hour mock and then go have a beer. We're picking picks and living with these. So it's just a whole different weight attached.
Mike, when you look at this, and obviously it is a weighty pick for general manager Andrew Berry when you hold number 2 overall in this draft. If you were Andrew Berry, if you were making these picks for the Cleveland Browns, what direction would you go at number 2? And for argument's sake, we'll just assume that Cam Ward is the number 1 pick in this draft.
Yeah, I think I'd be on the Travis Hunter boat. I think when you talk about a kid where people say, listen, he's the best corner in this draft, and other people say he's the best wideout in the draft.
Yeah.
And the first time I put his tape in, what I thought I was going to see was kind of a corner, playing spot duty on offense. And the first tape I put in, he played like 150 snaps.
Yeah.
And to put context, if you're a starting corner in the NFL, you're probably playing – if you play every snap, you're playing 65 snaps a game.
Yep.
This kid was playing 150 to 150. His conditioning's off the chart. I know GMs who would play him at corner and use a package of plays on offense. And I think it's interesting that Andrew Berry's gone the other way, just like that's why it's such a compliment to this kid. Andrew Berry is going, yeah, we see him as a wide out first. I think it's a little more difficult that way. Because working him into defense on the defensive side of the ball, I think is a little more difficult than working him into the offensive side of the ball. But he's a special kid, and no matter who takes him, I can't wait to see what happens.
Mike, what do you, as you mentioned, Andrew said that if he is the pick, that they see him as a receiver and then the defensive side of him. Quite honestly, the Browns need help at playmaker. When you watch the tape of him, and no one's ever done what he's done in college football. No one's ever attempted it. Offensively, what do you see in him, and what type of weapon would he be?
Offensively, the kid had 96 catches and 15 touchdowns. His ability to separate in short areas is outstanding. He's not a 4.29 guy, but his speed is also really good. So the separation ability is innate and natural. The hands, the ball skills are outstanding. Incredible. I love the fact that when you line him up against the corner, whether it's press or off, he can create separation. And I do think he has to get stronger at either position. 183 pounds. I think he can get to 193, 195 over the next year to two. But time on task at either position. And so I think it's really important that let's assume it's Cleveland that takes him. I think that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have to have a plan. Okay, he's going to be a wideout first, and we're going to use him on defense. Okay, well, how do we use him on defense? Nickel, dime? Is it a game-to-game thing? How many minutes a day is he on the defensive side of the ball in practice? What's he doing sitting in the meetings? Because his conditioning's off the charts. He's supposed to be a really intelligent kid. I think the bigger issue is how much can he handle mentally. And is it just, okay, you're going to get a package on the opposite side of the ball, or are we really going to try and integrate you deeply into both sides?
It's going to be fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
He is unique in that way, and that will be certainly something to watch if the Browns do select him at number 2. I wanted to ask you, kind of, as you know, we always talk about the phone's ringing, and now we're seeing all these reports. People are calling the Browns. They won't put the phone down. We were having a discussion about, okay, so we're at number 2. Travis Hunter is considered a blue-chip prospect in this draft. Abdul Carter is, and, maybe let's say there's 6 just for argument's sake. If you were the GM at number 2, are you trying to only move down if you're staying in that blue chip tier? And if the answer is you'd go outside of it, does that significantly raise the price of moving down for you as a GM?
Yeah, I think I would probably be talking with my head coach about, if we were to move down, number 1, how far would we be willing to go? And every draft is different.
Yep.
In this particular draft, I don't think you'd want to get past 8 or 9 maximum. So, if New Orleans came up and wanted to get to 2, for instance, I think you could still get a blue chipper, assuming they're taking a quarterback. But that's kind of the end of it.
Okay.
After that, I think there's a dip. So if somebody, it reminds me of years ago, Howie Roseman with the Eagles. He had the 12th or 13th pick, and he wanted to get up to 2 to take Carson Wentz, and he couldn't get to 2 in one jump. He had to go from 12 or 13 up to like 7 or 8,
Yep.
and then get up to 2. He had to make 2 moves to get where he wanted, because the team at 2 wasn't going to go beyond a certain place.
Yep.
So to me, that's the first. How far down will you go? And then the second piece is, if you are willing to go down to 5, 6, 7, 8, what's it going to cost? And obviously, each pick will cost you more.
Mike, when you were in the seat and you're this far out, 48 hours or so out from the draft, the day 1 of the draft, how much were you decided upon? In other words, your board was set. This is what we're doing if this – or how much was there still ambiguity? I guess I'm curious, because we've talked to Andrew a lot, and he says, well, and I don't know if he's telling the truth, but I think he's got to take a company line and just say, look, we haven't decided yet. But how much of that is true? How much had you had locked in 48 hours before the draft?
I think when you're sitting at 2, that piece of it is fairly simple.
Yeah.
It's complicated a little bit by the trade rumors we talked about a moment ago, but I think he and Kevin are very intelligent individuals, and they've already defined what they will or won't do. So by this point, I think they ought to be locked and loaded unless something crazy comes in. And again, they're very smart individuals. They'll figure it out if something crazy comes in. But they ought to be locked and loaded at 2, and they ought to have a pretty good idea that if 2 is going to be, Travis Hunter, then what is the next plan? And how we've got 33, we got 67, 94. At what point does the quarterback come into this equation? How important is that this year in this draft to get a rookie quarterback? And where do we feel comfortable? Where's the sweet spot for us? That complicates things a little bit, I believe. But what every GM does, I think, is you have a pretty good feel the night before each of the 3 nights. In other words, you're going in the first round. You even if you're picking at 27 or 32, you've got a group of kids you'll accept that either you got 4, 5, 6 guys. I'm good with them. If your board gets wiped out, you better have somebody in your back pocket. I think back to who was New England. Bill Belichick told me once his board got completely wiped out. They were sitting at like 31 or 32. They had nobody. So they took what was in their back pocket was Logan Mankins, who ended up going to about 6 or 8.
Pretty well.
Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was second or third round grade. And the point was, if we get stuck, we better get a good football player, no matter what anybody else thinks. So I think by this point, and then what happens is after the first round, you go home and you sit down and you talk, okay, what's our plan for rounds 2 and 3? And then after the third round, you come home and you have the same thing. And I think one of the advantages the Browns have this year, and why I think they have to be nimble, is because picking at the top of the first round is obvious, but picking at the top again, heading into round number 2,
Yep.
you're going to get a bunch of phone calls. Sitting at the top of round number 4, you're going to get a bunch of phone calls. I mean, one year, my first year with the Raiders, I think we had picks 106 and 108, which were at the front of the 4th round. We knew we were going to take Max Crosby with 106 if he was there, and we moved down with 108 2 or 3 different times, and then moved back up in the 5th to get Hunter Renfrow. So creating those extra picks, and again, it was all because we were at the top of the round and teams wanted to move, and it gave us the ammunition to do it.
How do you weigh, and obviously for the Browns, a quarterback's still a major, major need for this team, and if, it isn't Shadur at 2, how do you weigh being at 33 and saying, okay, let's get back into the first round? We have the first pick of the second round. Let's get back in the first round. It's a pick that's been traded 3 consecutive years, twice to go into the first round, once with somebody coming up to 33. But how do you kind of, as a general manager, weigh that and what you would give up to get that quarterback that you didn't want to take it to, but would now take for multiple theoretical assets and draft picks?
Yeah, they've already figured out and had conversations with other general managers. To me, the logical thing is, okay, you're sitting there with pick 33. How high up do we have to go? Let's investigate. To me, the logical points are 24 with Minnesota. They only have 4 draft picks.
Yep.
And should be looking to move down.
And they know each other very
Washington,
well. With Kwesi having been here. Yep.
Yep. And then at 29 with Washington, they only have 5 picks, the second least draft value in the league. Same conversation. So depending on where you think you have to get, you should have already had the conversations with these GMs about, hey, if I want to come up to 24 or I want to come up to 29 and you guys come down to 33, what would it take? So you already ought to know that. And if, and you already know the quarterback that you have in mind. Is it Jackson Dart? Is it Sanders if he went far enough? Or, it all depends on the value they place on those 2 quarterbacks. I would tell you one thing. I mean, it's interesting to me. I feel like around the league, there's more interest in the second-day quarterbacks than I've seen in a while. And I would define those guys as like Tyler Shuck from Louisville,
yep.
Milroe from Bama, Will Howard, Ohio State, and McCord from Syracuse.
Yep.
I think those 4 guys go in the second day. And it seems to me there are a lot of teams grinding those guys hard, more so than usual.
Interesting.
So you got to kind of know what your target is and where you need to be to get them.
Talking to Mike Mayock, Westwood One NFL analyst, formerly NFL Network, formerly general manager of the Oakland Raiders. Really good stuff here. Mike, Shadur Sanders has been a constant topic for 2 months. A year ago at this time, most mocks had him going number 2 overall. Actually had Carson Beck going number 1 is the way Quinn Ewers was high on that too. What do you make of Shadur? You've obviously seen a lot of him. You watch a lot of Travis film. If you watch Travis film, you watch Shadur film. What do you see in him?
Yeah, I worked hard on his tape, and on the plus side, he's really tough. He took a beating behind a really poor line 2 years ago that wasn't a whole lot better this past year. He's tough. He's accurate at all 3 levels, has an innate touch, level 3, the deep ball, drop it in a bucket. All those things I really like about him. Athletically, he's good, but not great, not dynamic. He's got some pocket situational awareness stuff that I think is really caused more by the fact that his O-line was so bad, he got in some bad habits, and I think he can break them. But I think he does everything well. I don't think he's got one elite trait where you go, wow, that's our guy, unless you look at his body of work and see what he did at Jackson State in Colorado, taking bad programs to where he took them. So you got to give the kid a ton of credit. At the end of the day, and I used to work with his dad at NFL Network and have a lot of respect for him. At the end of the day, what I hope for the kid and for the franchise to take him is the right fit. Forget about whether you go 2 or 3 or 21 or 34 or wherever. if you get to the right situation at the right time, he'll thrive.
Yeah, and that's the key. That's the key, and I think this would be a wonderful fit for him. Talking with Mike Mayock. Mike, can you give us one more little kind of just peek behind the curtain? Because I think people feel like when teams get together that there's just consensus in the room. But you have so many area scouts. You have so many, the coaches have their opinions. You have people under you as a general manager, your director of player personnel. You've got your assistant general manager. Everybody's got their own opinions. How hard is it to actually get it, down to the consensus opinion? And how often does the GM have to say, this is what it is because I'm the GM and this is what I think?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and the scouts live with every draft for over 11 months a year.
Yep.
The coaches come in late after the season, and every team in the league is different in how much input the coaches do or don't have.
Yep.
So it's really important. I'll tell you what's interesting is from a scout's perspective, it's fairly, I would say, I don't want to say easy, but it's part of our jobs to get the board down to the point when you're stacking the board by position, you can get it there, and you feel very comfortable by the end of the combine and your board is pretty much set by position. The hard part, and I don't think people really understand the distinction that much, the hard part is taking that board and then translating it to your final board where you're listing your players 1 to 130 or 150 or 200, however many you're listing.
Yep.
And you've got several players with the exact same grade from different positions. So if you've got 7 guys with a 6.8 grade, how do you differentiate, filter between each of them? And that's where it gets really interesting because guys got to stand on the table for their guys. But at the end of the day, what's most important is what is best for the building. Not my guy or your guy. In our building, we had a lot of coach input because Coach Gruden had kind of final say at the end. So there was an awful lot of input, and we had to filter it all through at the end and say, okay, here's our board.
Mike, I can't thank you enough for your time. That's as illuminating of an interview as I think we've done on this show. Maybe it's
Ever.
way up there. That was
From
amazing.
this standpoint, yeah.
It was awesome. It was great to learn all of that, and thank you for sharing it with us today and giving us a little bit of your time.
Yeah, I hope the Cleveland Browns feel like they're a lot better at the end of the weekend. Good luck, fellas.
So do we.
Us too.
Thank you. Yes.